it's a bunch of Greeks living and speaking Greek and sort of living there forever and making a little Greek town. Ironically, most people tend to be transient through those neighborhoods. You stay there until you get a better job, you get a better place to live, you quickly learn English and move out and go somewhere else, right? Go further west. The first Jewish guy to be a Supreme Court Justice, Louis Brandeis, his family immigrated from Europe. They moved to New York briefly and ended up in Louisville, Kentucky. And so they stayed in the Jewish community in the Upper East Side for a very short period of time until his father got a job offer somewhere out west and they moved out west. And then they left that behind, right? And so those things often function as like stepping stones. And so at the same time, you might say nativism, concern about immigrants, is a huge political concern, right? The idea that all of these foreign-speaking people are bringing political ideas like particularly socialism and anarchism that are very un-American. The idea that Irish Catholics are bringing in Pope worship to attack our traditionally Protestant country. In California, the idea that the Chinese are going to take over everything is so prevalent that some of the most racist legislation in American history is enacted at the local level to bar, for example, women of Chinese ancestry. That way all the Chinese men who come to get work on the railroads can't have kids. Right? And they will presumably go home because they want to have kids, so they have to go home to do it. And you can't bring in Chinese women. In 1882, there's a federal law, the Chinese Exclusion Act, that actually bans Chinese people at all, period. And so that sort of stuff plays a lot, right? San Francisco is a hotbed of anti-Chinese sentiment because of the fears that people have that the Chinese immigrants are going to come and sort of take their jobs, right? And so having said that, let's talk about the actual environment in which people work, right? It's not that pleasant, to put it bluntly. Most factories tend to be in repurposed buildings that are repurposed for the idea of a factory. In the 20th century, if you think of the idea of a factory, it's like a big, basically kind of flat building that's basically open plan and has big doors, and so you can move stuff in and out. That's a very 20th century factory design. They call it the cathedral of work kind of a thing, right? A lot of light, natural light, so you can light it up easily during the day. Big doors so you can move in machines and finished products and stuff. Workers come in and out. And it's open plan so you can do anything you want to the inside, right? You can put the machines where you need them to be. That's 19th century. Henry Ford builds a bunch of those up north. In the 19th century, particularly in places like New York, most of the buildings were old buildings that they repurposed as a factory. And so what you would do is put a steam engine in the basement, put the machines on the various floors, and then often you'd run a piston up and down the length of the building on the outside and then cover it with a brick or whatever. And then the piston would pump up and down when the steam engine ran, and you would connect a big metal rod to the piston that would, the piston would go up and down, and the metal rod would convert the up and down into spinning. And then you'd plug all the machines into that. And so it's incredibly loud because there's this giant, 2-ton metal rod going up and down, rattling on the side of the building. And also it's dangerous because you have a giant steam engine, giant metal rod, but that allows the steam engine to power all the machines in the building. It's sort of like plugging them into electrical outlets today, right? So you have all these machines connected to this big rod that spins, and there's a big lever, and every morning when they bank up the steam engine, you pull the lever to connect the floor to the steam engine, and when the steam engine goes, it makes all the machines go. So the machines can't really be turned off. They can't really be disconnected. It's not very safe to do that. And when this system fails, it's catastrophic, right? I mean, when the metal rod slips, it just annihilates the entire building and we all die, I guess, when a 2-ton metal rod sails through the building. If the steam engine doesn't get banked properly and the boiler overheats, it blows up like a bomb, right? It will level an entire building. So you always have to vent the steam engine. If you've ever seen The Shining or read the novel by Stephen King, that's the whole plot of the novel is don't forget to vent the boiler in the basement of the Overlook Hotel, even if it's creepy to go down there. And so these factories are loud, they're noisy, the machines can't really be stopped, they can't really be interfered with, it's kind of like the machine is going and you just sort of dive in and grab it, right? And so you can see here, this is a textile factory in the 19th century, there it is. And you can see there are 2 workers operating the textile machine. They're probably like 8 or 9, so I mean they're probably hard at work operating the textile mills. And so the genius of these things, though, especially things that are made out of metal, is that what we've done is instead of making objects and pieces, or making the pieces then making the object, what you do is the machines make the pieces, and then you assemble them yourself, right? And so we call this interchangeable parts, right? It's sort of like you get a machine that makes Legos, and then you assemble all the Legos into the pirate ship, right? The advantage here is that if a machine makes all the individual pieces, then the individual pieces are identical. Right? And that way, if a machine if your car has a part that breaks, You just take it to the shop, you say, my blank broke, and they just fix it. They take that part out, throw it away, and they know exactly the part to get. They say you have a 2012 Honda Civic, so you need a fuel distributor for a 2012 Honda Civic. They're all exactly the same. Every single 2012 Honda Civic has literally the exact same fuel distributor because they're made that way. And that way, if a machine fails because a part fails, you just take the part out and put the new part in, and they're identical, right? This is the genius of modern mass production. But it also means that your primary job as a craftsperson is operating these machines that make the little parts, right? And that doesn't often require a lot of know-how. You don't have to be a craftsman. You just operate a machine. You just work a machine to do a certain thing. Pull a lever, shove a thing in. Pull a lever, shove the thing in, or whatever, right? And so these factories often can be pretty dangerous. Today, if you go to work in a factory, typically there will be some concern for workers. There's laws about that sort of thing. None of that exists in the 19th century. So a few things. Volume, not hours, determines your pay. So if you go to work today in a factory, they will pay you like X amount of money per hour, right? In the 19th century, they will typically pay you X amount per thing that you produce, right? Shoes is a good example. Shoes are made in two parts, uppers and soles. There's only three sizes, small, medium, large. And so what will happen is that I will have a huge pile of uppers and soles. Everybody's sitting around the table. You grab uppers and soles, you stitch them together, put them in a box at your feet. At the end of the day, you dump your box out, I count, and you get like a penny per shoe, right? The pro is the faster you sew shoes, the more you get paid. The con is you have to sew shoes to get paid, right? It's not like I'm going to pay you a reasonable wage based on how fast I think you will work averagely. So I'm going to pay you for what you produce and no more. Also, the fun thing I can do as your boss is I can like divide everyone into two teams and say, you guys are team one, you guys are team two. At the end of the day, the team that produces the most shoes gets a 10% bonus, and the team that produces the lowest number of shoes, I will fire one of you randomly. And so, good luck, have a great day, right? And like, hopefully that one guy that doesn't do a lot of work really does not phone it in today, or like you could lose your job, right? And so, another thing we could mention is the work day is typically 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And so, that's just the way that it is, right? And you would think, well, that's horrifying, and you would be right. Upper class performers often wonder at the low moral character of working class people. On the seventh day, on Sunday, the Sabbath, they don't seem to really want to go to church. And I guess it's because there's just something inherently bad about working class people that they don't like religion. But the answer is very clear. If you worked a 60-hour week on the seventh day that you didn't have to work, I would really like to lie in bed and I guess contemplate the futility of my own existence. I don't want to get up early and go to church, right? Because it's the one day, and it's the one day where you have to do everything else in your life, which you can't do on a day that you typically work 10 hours a day. And so for some reason, people only seem to want to file into the saloons and drink themselves into a stupor on Sunday, and upper class people just can't fathom why. It's because, well, that's the only day they have to do anything other than work. Yeah.
Oh, and back in those days, there were these things called pew rents, essentially meaning you had to pay to go to church, and, more prime spots cost more to sit in. So church wasn't free.
Yeah, oh yeah, and if you, I'm not gonna pay on my one day off to go to church. And then the upper class people, lower class people just seem like they're just fundamentally bad, right? It's like, if you work 60 hours a week, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, I think on the seventh day I would drink myself into a blind stupor and pick fights. It's not like my life is so great otherwise. You talk to guys on Fifth Avenue and they just don't get it, right? Friedrich Engels, the social reformers buddy with Karl Marx, he actually illustrated a lot of this when he went and talked to working class English people and wrote a book about it. And for the first time, upper class English people realized that that's the reason lower class people behave the way that they do, because their lives are totally different from yours, right? And so we'll see all this when we talk about Theodore Roosevelt, where he tried to enforce a law banning saloons on Sunday in New York City, which really enraged working class people, because that was the place where it was the restaurant they went to, it was their post office, it was their social club, and you can't go because some rich people have a problem with you drinking booze on Sunday, right? And so the pew fees is a big thing in the Protestant churches. The Catholic churches do that. The tithing is what they do. It's different, right? The Puritan churches, especially in the 1700s, really liked the fees. And that's one of the reasons why the Great Awakening happened and everybody moved out of the Puritan churches, because paying money to go to church seems like a scam.
Right, and those churches were often designed in such a way that all the seats were not equal. So if you were sitting, at the back of the church, then you couldn't see anything.
Well, we don't want you in the back.
Yeah.
And they have the one row up front that's painted white where we put the sinners. And so it's like, if you've been really bad, it's like we go and we pull you out and we're like, we're going to need you to sit in the front, adulterer. Okay, just saying, right? No, actually saying you. But then we put you at the hot seat in the front, so everyone can. And then when I give a sermon about adultery, it's like I'm like, it's not about you, but it's about you, and everyone should judge you for being in the bad seat, right? But yeah, put everybody in the back and they can't see, and it's like, oh, well, you don't like your seat in the back, then just buy a nicer seat. And then having your own seat that you paid for that's got your name on it, it's like a huge thing, because it's like that's our family pew in the church, right? So I mean, that's a big deal, yeah.
Yeah, there's this really interesting book that I had to read for a course last semester about the relationship between unions in like the early 20th century and churches, and it's just great.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Tell me the name of it later, actually. If I don't know about it, I would like to know about it. So, having said that, again, bear in mind that these are not great working conditions, right? There's also no worker comfort or safety is really on the table. So today, when you go to your factory to work, there will be things like a water fountain and a bathroom and a break room, because we understand that people, for example, need water and also like to pee and also eat food sometimes. But in the 19th century, we don't do that. First of all, I'm not paying you to pee, okay? If you want to pee, clock out, go home, pee, I don't know, in the street or something. I'm not paying you for that, right? I'm not paying you to do that. Also, eating, this isn't a restaurant, this is a factory, so if you want to eat, clock out, eat at home, and then come back or like eat smuggle a sandwich in your pocket, I guess. And so, health and safety is another issue. There's no real accommodation for that. Today, there's a federal agency, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, that literally mandates worker safety in industries, and they will come in and shut businesses down if they do unsafe practices. In the 19th century, there's nothing like that, and in some places there are rules like that, but they often don't get enforced because of bribes and corruption, right? The garment industry is notorious for its bad safety practices. And so, having said that, if you look at the factories, they often are cramped, they're ill-lit, people get bad backs from hunching over machines, they get digestive problems, they get bad eyesight from being in dark rooms. In the coal mines, people get black lung, which is where you cough and coal dust comes up, which is not good for your lungs. And so there's no idea that I as an employer should have to care about any of that, right? If you, a headlamp would be a great thing to have as a coal miner. You should probably buy one of those if you go to work for me. Yeah, you should probably, I'm sure there's a guy that sells them somewhere, right? I'm not gonna give you one because I'm just the coal mine owner. Why is that my problem, right? But if you want a face mask and don't breathe coal dust, that's thinking ahead. You should definitely get one, right? Because I'm not providing you that, right? It's not my problem. Another thing we mentioned is worker accidents and liability. The accidents are frighteningly common in the 19th century, and yet there's no employer liability of any kind whatsoever at all. There's no at all. And so if you get hurt on the job, the reason is that you are dumb and made a mistake. And that's, I feel my heart weeps, but it's not like it's not my problem, right? And so today, it's the total opposite. If you get hurt on the job, your employer, first of all, they cannot fire you unless you did that yourself and it was your mistake and you ignored like your supervisor, right? If you get hurt during the normal operation of your job and it's not something that you did where like your employer, your supervisor said, don't turn on that machine, and you did and like it blew up the factory, if it was something that was an accident that was not your fault, your employer has to keep your job for you, pay for your medical expenses, and compensate you for wages. And so that's something that's very 20th century, as it turns out. If you get hurt in a factory in the 19th century, even if it was my fault, guess what? You're fired. I'm sure it'll be fine. Your leg got chopped off or whatever. I guess it's good luck in your future life, right? Don't let the door hit you on the way out, right? I don't want aspirins on my door. And so 35,000 people died per year in factories in the 19th century, at least. 6,000 to 7,000 people died a year in the railroad in some cases, the railroad being very dangerous. And there was no concept of like that I have to make the workplace safe, right? And today, again, if you go to work in a factory, they're gonna have safety doors and sirens, and they're gonna have, the big thing they have on all the conveyor belts is anybody can stop it at any time. If there's an accident occurring, they can pull the red line and stop it. None of that exists in the 19th century. It's like if there's a problem, I guess whatever, right? And so the big one is these things jam all the time. And kids are great, by the way, because you don't have to pay them anything to work. You can pay, those kids are probably making a tenth of what an adult would make operating that machine, which is great if you're the boss. But the good news is, if the machine jams, somebody's got to reach in there and unjam the machine. They really got to do that. And so the question we have is, who's going to do that? I mean, me with my large adult hands, I can't do it, right? Little Timmy over there, he's got a little tiny kid hand. So we say, look, Timmy, get in there and unjam the machine. Now look, sometimes when you unjam the machine, it restarts suddenly, and you gotta really yank your hand out of there fast, or your hand will get ripped off by the machine. So just, you're 9, so Timmy, go ahead and do it, you're fine, right? And by the way, if your hand gets ripped off by the machine, that's not my fault, right? I mean, I didn't stick my hand in there, I didn't stick your hand in there, I didn't make you do it, I told you, but it's not the same, right? Now, by the way, if you sue me, what's the judge gonna say? The judge is gonna say, well, look, little Timmy, you were a worker in the factory, you knew the machine was gonna turn on, the guy told you it was, if your hand got ripped off,